I have been asked to talk about the strategy on transforming public libraries faster for the conditions in the knowledge society. And I gave my presentation the headline, "The potential impact of libraries is much bigger than they think." And I think that's what we heard today, actually. I come from Denmark, where there is a long tradition for strong public libraries and a very high political awareness of the impact of public libraries. Still, it's true. And when I say they, I mean decision makers and politicians. Now, I must congratulate you on this project, because when I say that the impact is higher, politicians and decision makers say, prove it. You did that. You prove it clearly. The assessment study shows in dry figures and very convincing that library users benefit more than non-users, and even more than users of telecenters and cyber cafes. There was particularly two kinds of outputs that I'm happy with today. Well, it's first and foremost the very strong stories about users being happy for meeting this offer. Libraries changing the lives of people in a very positive way. We need more of that because it's very, very convincing. And of course the evidence, the figures, support that. The other outcome I was very happy with was a statement from the Minister of Culture, because he said there is a very clear significance here that public libraries have improved and are ready to support implementation of the government's strategies. Why is that important? Because libraries actually can play a stronger role. And here is the highest ranking politician, the minister, who recognizes this potential. That's great. Congratulations. Well, libraries changed significantly. I think it's more than 15 years ago that the slogan "from collection to connection" was introduced. And later on, it was changed into "from collection to community center." And even later, from community center to creativity. I mean, it is a kind of development that involves the creativity of the libraries still more. There is another significant shift in the focus on product orientation to the focus on user orientation. Basically, that's a cultural revolution to change that kind of view, because you kind of lead your focus from the book to the reader or the user and the need of the user. And we see a shift in the focus on transactions, typically in the classical library, lending transactions, to a situation where relations between human beings and facilitating the use of the information resources is what it's all about. There are, of course, two different kinds of courses. And the basis for this is, as like everybody knows, is the digital revolution and the revolution in social technologies, which is changing the conditions for everything in our lives. If we look at users, a very typical example of the change in behavior you will find in their using, or rather not longer using, what used to be the crown jewel in the collection, the reference collection. Who would go to a library to look something up in the reference collection? No, it has to be online so that you can Google it. I mean, we discussed that many years ago, where many librarians said, well, we can compete with Google. No, you can't. And if you can't beat them, join them and make something better out of it. And that's what we are doing. The change in the professional role of the librarian, and another example, there are many, of course. But one is that having access from everywhere to contents, the focus on selecting and maintaining a collection is shifting to the facilitating, to learning and training in many different ways, and that is how it should be, and that is very, very happy situation that we are in, that so many libraries actually go for that with no compromise. If we turn very shortly and quickly to the situation in society, the change of society. What we see with our own eyes every day, if we are actually looking at what is going on in our societies, what are going on in our neighborhoods, how are the habits and behaviors of our fellow citizens changing, we can find evidence for that also among the researchers. Some of my favorite and very inspiring researchers and sociologists are Jean Lyotard, Anthony Giddens, and Sigmund Baumann, who each in their way states that institutions and individuals lose traditional identity and their roles are changing very, very fast. That means that you constantly have to make new choices. You have to make solutions on a new foundation all the time. We move, as Sigmund Baumann say, from solid traditions to a fluid situation, where nothing is solid any longer. That's why I state that traditions wither. The only constant is change. And what is needed in a situation where everything is changing is a massive need for personal and social competences. In one word, which I think is one of the best words in English, well, I'm not an English native speaker, but there is a good word, and that is empowerment. What you need is education, and national education, to empower people to manage their lives under these shifting conditions. I think the time is short, so I'll do that very short. I would have given some Danish examples on the challenges, and just a few ones. In the last few years, we lost 200,000 traditional jobs, and they will never come back. The challenge is the same with us as in many, many other countries. We have to invent and create new kind of jobs. We have to create a population whose innovative abilities is beyond what we have ever seen. If we don't do that, we cannot maintain the welfare society. And if welfare society is threatened, democracy is threatened as well. Another statement which I heard last week from a local politician, from an average, not poor, not rich Danish municipality, a suburb of Copenhagen. He said, 20% of all inhabitants here know nothing, won't do anything, and can't do anything. 20%. That's 1 out of 5. And he said, and he was talking to librarians, library directors, and forget about the 20%. We can't move them. What we can do is about the 60%. There is the last 20% that are what we're kind of building on, that are pulling and pushing. But the last 60%, focus on them. And if libraries can do a difference here, do it. I don't know if it's true. To me, it's very, very challenging to think of those 20%. But the crisis and the situation I think we are in is very different from any other situation that we have been in. We don't know probably how to handle a recession. Well, there are at the moment in Europe 2 different attitudes towards recession politically. We don't know how to handle this fragmentation of society. The gaps, the digital gaps that we have been aware of for more than 20 years is becoming deeper. We don't know actually really how to gap it and bridge it. We try, and we should of course. We lose identity and jobs very, very fast. There are lack of competences, etc., etc. We are acting, and this is actually a reference to the German-American management theorist Otto Scharmer, who made the theory U, which I plan to speak on, but there's not time for that. But he has some kind of methods in meeting these very huge challenges. He says that we are acting on a mixture of a constructed understanding of the past, what was working and what was not, and a constructed understanding of the future, and we are very uncertain about if our constructions are right. But it's a combination of that we can kind of try to construct a strategy in a new emergent reality. My point is that we have no institutions in our society that can really cope with these challenges because they are not fluid, to say it very simple. If the surroundings are fluid and we have solid institutions that have their identity rooted in another kind of society, well, then they are acting on a constructed understanding of the past and not on a constructed understanding of the future. We are struggling to bridge that. And my point is that that institution that is closest to do something here, that is the free public library. No other institution, not the schools, not any educational institutions, have the same potential to reach out for a national educational task. But, and that's my main point, we need to transform the library into a new kind of service. And it's naturally, deliberately, that I don't say institution. We still need an institution, but it must be much more. It must be fluid. It must be able to deliver services where people are, on the web, in the working place, in the sports club, in the neighborhood, everywhere, and different services. We saw the empathetic librarian. That is what is needed. In Denmark, we constructed a couple of years ago during a working party set down by the government and in close cooperation with the Royal School of Library and Information Science, who did this model, a new kind of concept, very theoretical concepts for the new library. I present it because it has now been available for a couple of years, and what I see is that Danish public libraries plan after this concept. It is actually accepted, and it's a way of thinking the new library. You will see there are 4 spaces where the headlines are, I would say, traditional, and some of them a learning space and an inspiration space. We know that. But there is also a meeting space. We heard a lot about that today, the library as a meeting space, and the search spots, etc. And there is a performative space where people are acting. And that's a kind of contribution to the need for innovation. There are 2 axes, a vertical and a horizontal, and they are about what are we aiming at? How should we guide ourselves toward in those spaces? And the key words in the vertical is experience for the individual and involvement in society and in activities. And in the horizontal, it's innovation and empowerment. And that is for the individual, and this is for the benefit of the society. The idea is that this is a concept that should kind of connect the virtual and the real library. And you should think in activities and programs and including people and letting people create their own activities as well as a frame for library activities. A very few examples. We made a new children's website, which is a storytelling universe with some figures that they can recognize, and they will read them on the web as well as they will meet them in the library, as well as they will meet them on the children's channel on the television. It's homework cafe on and offline. Started as offline homework cafes in the libraries, gradually growing also into online homework. It's done by volunteers, and volunteers is an asset which is of growing importance. We see that more and more, that with budgets that are shrinking, we need other activities based on volunteers. Learn more about ICT, that's learning programs. It's like we heard today, it's a tremendous success. Libraries are very, very good at informal learning. It's not enough, but it is one of the sources for this national education. The Health Cafe, we heard about Age Force, which is a kind of Facebook for elderly that is a tremendous success and are really activating and including elderly. Reading circles and clubs are exploding because they're facilitated in a new way and there's a new thinking behind it. There's a wonderful literature web where my question is, why should it just be a media web? We're all kind of media. It started as a non-fiction thing, but it should, as a fiction thing, but it should include non-fiction and all other kind of medias. Creative workshops. You could do that with volunteers as well. All kind of creative workshops. The career library. I thought of that when one of you talked about meeting famous people or VIPs in the library. The idea here is actually that young people could meet all professions. It was a Copenhagen library who got the idea, and in 3 days they had 130 professions. They asked for volunteers who would meet young people and tell them about their profession. How is it to become a nurse? What is a job like? It's a new kind of information and education. And getting so many volunteers in such a short time is really an asset. Well, this kind of activities corresponds, in my opinion, very, very clear to what is government goals, as the Lithuanian Minister of Culture spoke of. And we could translate, so to say, these activities into political goals. Do we want to stimulate children's linguistic development? Of course. I won't go through them, time is short. So, my point is, again, transformation of the libraries to meet objectives is done on the basis that the library at present was built on a solid agenda, a collection with access for everybody. And the library of tomorrow must be of another kind, fluid, offer new services, constantly new services, as new needs are emerging. And where people are, on the web, at workplaces, in the neighborhood, in the locker room, in the sports club, but also in the library. The physical library is actually still a tremendous success. Even if people don't use the offer of lending, they come to the library. The majority of Danish visitors, which is growing, are not lending anything. They're coming for other reasons. So I try to set up a kind of formula for change. And this is my last slide. A recipe, so to say, where you get the ingredients. And if you are cooks, or particularly non-cooks, you know that a recipe is not enough. You know, you have to have some skills, and you have to be able to really understand what it is about. But in short, you need a plan. You need to plan services based on meeting user needs, and diversify the offers and services much more than was the tradition of one collection that everybody are welcome to use. And the process of defining the user groups and the user needs is very, very difficult, and one of the big challenges. You have to base as many services as possible on partnerships. And it is like in all partnerships, your goal should be to make success for your partner. And here again, if you make partnerships with clubs, organizations in the neighborhood, with schools and other kind of institutions, fulfill their needs and do it with the tools that the library can offer. And change organization accordingly. I think that most libraries, public libraries, are still organized as they were when they had the collection and maintaining of the collection in focus. And what you need is to break up that organization and create a new kind of organization aiming on serving different groups of users. Let virtual and real services interact and support each other. That's obvious, but also difficult. Design the library space, the physical library, for different people and not for books. I mean, if you visit libraries today, you can very easily see if this is a book library or a people library. And offer ongoing activities in the library space, make it full of life. Learning, entertainment, presentations, everything. And if you say, we don't have the competencies to do that, my point is, you should plan for competence development, continuing education, or whatever you would call it, in a strategic way, which is, you have an ideal strategy for what you would do, for the role you would play in your local community. And you would say, what we need of competences are what we are going to achieve.